My path to healing started with addiction. I started to abuse drugs and alcohol at 13, but in that time, I found yoga. I feel content without getting high. Something's here. I actually learned how to heal. Trauma is where the conversation actually begins.
To be able to see and witness my own patterns, people pleasing, that can be a response to trauma.
It creates all these patterns, and some of our patterns are actually praised.
Even the way I was running my business was designed so that it could numb certain feelings that I wanted to avoid.
How do I take out those patterns but keep growing myself and my business?
What do you think prevents us from truly experiencing healing? Today's conversation is such an important one. We are talking about the impact of trauma on the way that we show up in our lives and in our businesses, and how to access healing is one of the bravest things you'll ever do, but also one of the most profoundly life-altering journeys you could go on. And I'm joined by someone who means so much to me. She is an OG. She was there with me before the start of all of this, my good friend Taylor Wray, and she's the founder of Awakening Soul. She's on a mission to create opportunities and experiences that really invite us to awaken our soul through yoga and breath work and her certification classes. She's someone who embodies the healing journey like no one I've ever seen. And this conversation I know is going to resonate with so many of you who've reached out to me. You're in my DMs, you're sharing so vulnerably the healing journeys that you're on right now. So I know no matter where you're at, you're going to find yourself in this conversation. Taylor, welcome to Powerhouse Women.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is something I need people to know. There are like a handful of women who, when I say like literally have been there from before the start of Powerhouse Women, and Taylor is one of those. Taylor and I, we connected through network marketing. We kind of connected through this wellness journey, which was beautiful. I think that was meant to bring us into each other's lives. But at the same time, we were both really at the start of this path of, I mean, now that I look back, it's like becoming the versions of ourselves that are sitting here today, like the women we always knew we were meant to become.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's so beautiful to have people who've been a part of the journey. And yes, we've kind of like dipped in and out of close contact over the years as we've just grown, but to get to actually have this moment to celebrate and acknowledge just how far we've come since the versions of us that like we used to like sit on my couch Friday night, and we had these, we would do it on Friday because we had these shirts that said Fry Yay.
Yep.
That we just both ended up having randomly. And we would literally get together once a week and talk about our big dreams and the things that we were working on, which at the time I was writing my book. The Powerhouse Women event wasn't even a thought yet. You were planning your very first ever yoga teacher training.
Yeah.
Now you lead trainings and certifications all over the world, international retreats. You're building a movement with Awakening Soul. And when you look back at that version of you, that was like 2016, what do you think she would say about all of this if she could see us now?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, it's been about 9 years. And I think back to those nights all the time, especially now reconnecting with you even more.
Mm-hmm.
When I think back to that version of myself to today, I am living beyond what I could have even imagined.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was only able to envision like the next step.
Yeah.
And it was such a stretch then. And now it's like surpassed it, where I look back and I'm just like, I can't believe this is my life now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about how much I've put in from that point to today and how much behind the scenes I've put in. And really the only thing is I just haven't stopped. Like all the moments that I've wanted to quit, I just didn't.
What keeps you going in the moments when you want to?
I think that, there's a lot to that question, actually. I think what keeps me going is knowing why I'm here and like what my purpose is and how it's so much greater than myself. And so if I find myself in fear or in moments where I want to stop or I want to quit, I realize that I'm making it about me and my own ego and not about like what I'm actually here to do. And that's helping other people heal, giving them tools, a space. And so then it just like that fear softens and I just keep going forward. Yeah.
And when I think about you, your impact, my view of watching you in the world, the word that comes to my mind is healing. And someone who is here in this lifetime with a mission of healing, our souls, whether we realize it or not, are signing up for a path that leads us deep into our own healing before we can offer that to anyone else. And your path of healing starts many, many years ago in your teens. And I want you to take us back to that moment and what was happening in your life that really set you on the path to discover deeper things about healing than most people will ever experience.
So I just hit in January 14 years sober. And so my path to healing started with addiction. And I started to abuse drugs and alcohol at 13. I kind of go a little bit before that because I found drugs at 13, but I was in a lot of toxic behavior at like 10, 11, 12. With body image, eating disorders, and just unhealthy habits to distract myself from feeling. Once I found drugs, it was like, oh, wow, this is nice. I don't have to feel anything. And I went pretty hard, and it took 13 to 21. So in my entire teens, I was partying, I was on heavy drugs. But in that time, I found yoga at 15. So I was always this person that knew throughout that, like, this isn't me. This isn't right. Like, I knew it wasn't aligned. But I was like consciously choosing it in a way because I didn't know how to be with myself. And I kept trying to find a healthy lifestyle. And I was 15 years old. And I went to my first yoga class. And it was amazing. It changed my life. I didn't quite understand what was happening in it. In the last posture in the class, Shavasana, where you're just in meditation and you ground, I started to cry and I didn't know why. But all I knew at the time was I feel okay. I feel content without getting high, without self-medicating. Something's here. And so I kept showing up. I kept going back, but I was living like two lives. And I was literally like going to yoga and then going and partying the same day. And I was doing that for a while. And I went into big binges between drugs and stopping the mindfulness and yoga practice. And then I would go back and kind of swing back and forth for years. Until I hit my first period of sobriety. And I did that all on my own at 19, I think it was 19, almost 20. And at that time, I had used yoga on my own. I used yoga, mindfulness, meditation, and that was it. I just went inward. And I had the support of my mom, but I wasn't in therapy. I didn't have many other tools at the time. And I went through my first yoga teacher training. I knew it was my path. It was huge. I loved it. And so I traveled to New York at 20 years old, went through my first teacher training, and I went there with a lot of fear. So much fear. I'm 10 months sober. So much fear of being seen. My greatest fear at the time was public speaking. It was just being exposed. So I was very afraid of that. I had a teaching job already lined up to come back to in Scottsdale. And knowing that created so much anxiety that when I come back, I'm not going to do it right. I'm not going to be a good teacher. I'm going to be exposed that I can't do this. So it's a whole journey, but I ended up relapsing my last day of teacher training. The whole group, we graduate, the whole group went out to celebrate. And by the time the server got to me, everyone was ordering drinks. And I talked myself into it. And I was like, you know what? You're on your path. You're doing good. Alcohol wasn't really your problem. You can do it. It's a celebration. And I ordered a drink and it spiraled me. And I went with the party people, partied all night in New York. And I was on a binge for 4 months at that point. It was the hardest time in my life because I had felt like I failed. Mm-hmm. I hid it very well. I came back. I started teaching in a relapse. It was the deepest shame I had ever felt. And I quit teaching after a month because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle how I was feeling. And completely closed the dream of being a yoga teacher. At that point, I was like, I failed. I quit. I'm not meant to do this. I'm not good at this. And I just kept partying, using, and hit a very, very hard rock bottom about 4 months later. And I went to rehab. I went to treatment in Utah. And it was the best experience. I really needed it. I needed the treatment. I needed the therapy. Mm-hmm. I needed to leave my home and like leave the area I knew and go somewhere to literally just focus on how do I live sober? I didn't know how. And that's what happened when I hit that second rock bottom is I told my mom, I don't know how to live my life sober. I feel like at this point I have two options. I honestly wanted my life to end at that time. I was so low that I was ready for it to end, whether it was by choice or by an accidental overdose. Mm-hmm. And I told my mom that, and I said, I don't know what to do at this point. I can't do this life. I don't know how. And I get emotional thinking back because it was just such a big moment. Mm-hmm. And she was like, let's send you to treatment. You're doing so good, but we need to get you help. And I said, yes. Mm-hmm. And it changed the course of my life, and I actually learned how to heal, and I learned how to be with my trauma, and stayed there for about a year and a half. And it was so intense, but I was there for it. I was so here for it. Out of 20 people in the group in rehab, no one else really wanted to be there.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was the one that was like, I'm going to do everything it takes. It was really interesting as well. The person running the program had said, there's 20 of you here right now. Statistics show one of you will get sober today and stay sober forever. Everyone else, a few of you will relapse at least once, maybe twice. 3 out of 20 will overdose and die within the next X amount of years. And when she was saying this, I was like, okay, well, I'm the one. And it's true, I am. And the other parts are true as well. People that I was in there with have overdosed and passed.
Yeah.
And so just being in that reality was so eye-opening and connects back to the first question you asked me, like, how do I keep going when I want to quit? And that is because I have seen people's lives completely get taken from addiction or just living in this life completely numb from everything and being able to soak up the beauty in life. And so at that point, I had decided if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in and I'm going to really live my life out. And it took me 3 more years. I was sober to actually come back to, I can do this. I can jump back into my dream of being a yoga teacher. And I had to jump into a lot of fear. And I did. I went through a second teacher training. I felt so afraid every day, and I just worked through it.
I am kind of just like sitting here, even knowing your story and knowing your journey, just present to the courage, and at such a young age. I think the older I get, the more I realize like how dumb I was, like how
Totally.
not prepared I was for the world.
Yeah.
And how impressionable, like how fear can get in, especially at that stage of life, and just grab hold. And I know that there was a really horrible moment for you in coming face to face with, I think, how real those statistics were in finding someone that you loved and someone that you had been through the program with. Do you want to share a little bit about what that moment was like and what its impact was on you? Do you still think about that moment?
Yeah. So I did 30 days inpatient in treatment, and then I transitioned to sober living. It was part of the same rehab center. And at that point, you're living in sober living, and you have more freedom. And you also have a lot of guidelines still. And so I had a job, and I was working at Urban Outfitters. And,
Cute.
Yeah. And I had a roommate in sober living. She was a bit older. And at that point, we had lived together. It was just the two of us in this one. It's kind of like a little condo. You can envision that. And we had lived together at that point, maybe just 5 weeks. But we got close as roommates in that aspect. We weren't the best of friends, but I obviously got close to her. And I started to notice her shifting. And one night I had come home kind of late, and I noticed that she was high and that she relapsed, and she was completely oblivious. It was really bad. It was like midnight. And at that time I had thought, okay, I definitely need to tell them tomorrow when I go back in for outpatient. I'm going to tell the person running the group program. And that whole night I couldn't sleep. I knew something was off. I knew she relapsed, and it wasn't out of the ordinary. She fell asleep on the couch a lot, like watching a movie. And I'd wake up and go downstairs and get ready and go and leave in the mornings, and I would see her on the couch sleeping. Mm-hmm. So the same kind of thing happened that morning, and I come down, and I glanced over and thought, wow, she was so out of it. Like, look at the position she fell asleep in. And honestly, it didn't cross my mind that she could have actually died yet. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'll tell them right away. They need to go check on her right now. I went in and I had told them, I said, I know she relapsed. Please go check in on her. And they didn't get around to it until I got home. And it was about 3 that I got out, 3 p.m. And I got there at like 8 a.m. And I opened the door, and she was in the same position that I had left her in. And that's when I went up to her and I kind of moved her to look, and yeah, she had passed. And I had a completely outer body experience. I started screaming, and I left my body. People came and they heard me, and they took me out, and I couldn't believe it. And I just kept repeating, like, I left her dead all day. Like I had taken that on for a minute. And it had hit that she was already passed when I left in the morning, because it was the same position, but I didn't connect that yet. And that took me down. And yeah, I'm great. And there's nothing about this that I'm grateful for. I'm glad I was in a traumatic experience where at the rehab center, they brought me back inpatient for 2 more weeks to work through that trauma immediately. And I had learned, like, I know there was nothing I could have done, because I had carried a lot of guilt that I could have done something myself. So I shared her story, and I shared with people the reality of how quick this can take your life. And she had overdosed from my drug of choice, opiates, at the time. And I'm as you know, I'm very spiritual, and I connect into other realms. And so deep in meditation, she had come to me And I went to the apartment to cleanse it a week later and to get my stuff. And I had a whole conversation with her.
I don't think we've ever talked about this.
Yeah. So it was just me in the apartment, and she came through, and her soul came through, and she was just told me, like, I'm so sorry. You had to be the one. There's nothing you could have done. You were the one to find me because I know you will be the one to share this story and the message in a way that will impact the world. And so I took it at the time, like, I was already so committed to my sobriety, and that just solidified it.
Yes.
And then I started sharing more with people in recovery and just being more open about my experience and realizing how real this is. I think back, and I so confused as to how my life didn't end from all the decisions I made in my addiction. Like, how did I come through that truly? And I know now, like, it's because I had to go through all of that to do the work that I'm doing today, helping people go inward to heal. And I was just so committed. It solidified everything, and it changed my life. And I think about her all the time. I think about it all the time when I'm teaching, because when I'm teaching and when I'm having conversations with people that show up in my spaces of breath work, yoga, retreats, teacher trainings, it's the same stuff for every person that comes up on the parts of us that we need to heal. It's the same behind every single person.
What do you think as a society we misunderstand about that healing process that prevents us from truly experiencing healing?
I think that trauma, I think it's getting more normalized today than ever. And that's amazing. Especially back then, it wasn't talked about. It wasn't this conversation that we're having more and more today, which I'm so grateful for. And I definitely think trauma gets confused. And I think it becomes, to some people, this big thing of like, no, I don't have trauma, or that makes me bad if I do. So I think trauma is where the conversation actually begins, because unhealed trauma is what leads us to using drugs and alcohol or other distractions to not feel and to not be present with ourselves, because we don't know how to be. We're overwhelmed. We're outside of our capacity to be with discomfort. And trauma creates that. It creates a dysregulation in the nervous system. And so if we don't know how to come back and regulate, it creates chaos in any direction from that point.
I'm so grateful, as you're saying, that it is a more normalized conversation, because I am the classic case of someone who for years couldn't find myself in the conversation of trauma, especially big T trauma. And it wasn't really until experiencing everything over the last year that almost had me just look deeper into, what are the ways that I cope with not wanting to feel things? And it was almost this backward approach into just acknowledging, and I'm going to have you define, in your words, what trauma actually is in a moment, because what my version of it wasn't so much the shame of not wanting to admit that there were things that just impacted me and impacted the way that I move through the world. It was this story of, but it's not that bad. I actually I've not experienced anywhere near what I know a lot of other people have. So it's not okay for me to sit with or acknowledge that there are very real coping strategies that I adopted very early on. And the tricky thing is, my coping strategies are highly praised.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening who may be hearing your story and possibly feeling the way that I just described of like, well, okay, I don't know that I have trauma because I don't have these huge moments that, of course, that's going to impact the way that you see the world. How can you help us understand what trauma is, almost to destigmatize this word that carries so much weight?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple things I want to touch on with it. First, we can simply see trauma as it's not the event itself. It's the response to an event. It's our reaction. That's it. And everyone has their own reaction, their own response. Two people could be in the same exact traumatic experience or just overwhelming experience, we could say. One person leaves traumatized, PTSD. One person is okay. They're regulated. They're able to kind of work through it, and they just keep moving forward. They don't carry anything from it. So it's never the actual event necessarily. And there's a couple things I want to speak to with like big T and little t trauma as well. Yes, there really are people are going through things that are like awful. And especially when you stack it and on top of each other, if someone's experiencing the same repetitive trauma for an extended period of time, or they have 10 very massive events happen,
right,
their nervous system 100% changes. And then you might have someone who has one shock trauma event. Their nervous system changes as well, but it can be, and I do this in quotes, easier to regulate back from it. And it depends on like your age. Everything depends on what was your childhood like? How did you grow up? What is all your previous experiences that led you to today to see how you respond to this experience? I don't like to put hierarchy to trauma, is where I'm going with this. Because everyone's trauma is valid. Everyone's reaction is valid. And it's their response. And so putting it in this like, well, that's worse than this.
Right.
I don't like doing that. Especially seeing all the people that come through in my community, underneath it, it causes the same things. That's the thing, is underneath it all, whether it seems like this great big experience or this kind of quote small thing, it's the same reaction underneath it all. They need to heal the same parts. It's the same response. So in the long run, I just see trauma is trauma is trauma.
And that part that you said, that helped connect something in my brain. Again, to even just like remove that word if it doesn't resonate with your mind, but to realize that there was this what happened and then how it was interpreted. And then when I look again at the patterns that now I've been unwinding, it's how I learned to behave in order to cope or in order just to feel safe again. Yeah. How do you describe, you are trauma informed in terms of the modalities that you teach and that you facilitate others in. How do you help practitioners understand the nuances of the different type of experiences that are in a room? We're talking here in terms of yoga and the modality that you facilitate, breath work, things like that. But, what do people need to understand about, I guess, like this collective experience as human beings that I think will make us more compassionate to the people that we serve, no matter what it is, no matter what flavor of impact each of us is really pursuing.
Yeah. And I like how you said it's one thing with trauma too, is if there's an inability to find safety to come back. It's like when something traumatic happens, it creates a surge of energy in the body and the nervous system. And a lot of times people can easily regulate and come back to this grounded, centered space. And then a lot of times people can't. And that's where the trauma starts to get created into more of like a long-term effect, which creates new patterns. And those patterns are just trying to protect you. So I think the first thing that we always want to come back to is like finding safety and then creating safety for others. Like, how can I create a safe space for someone else to be exactly as they are right here, right now? And all that comes back to is love, really. How can I understand that? Like, we're all on this journey and we're all doing our best with what we have. And so recognizing like, oh, if someone's having a reaction, like what's behind it? We don't know. And it's hard because I think people easily judge, reactions. But when we can kind of step back and see, well, what's the pattern that led that person there? And I think that can bring us all into compassion and empathy.
That's so true. I think that's one of the side benefits, if you will, of being in a healing process is the compassion it's given me for myself and for everyone. I mean, even the strangers I interact with in the world, right? Because to be able to see and witness my own patterns and just some of the fears that were driving them and some of the early ages where that got embedded, like, oh, that's where I learned that people pleasing, that's a common one that comes up within this community, that can be a response to trauma. And again, whether we're going to label it that or label it as something where, I just learned I had to adapt and work and I had to operate this way in the world in order just to feel safe within myself. It helped me to see my own patterns through the lens of compassion, but also patterns that aren't mine. So if I have more of the people-pleasing tendency, I struggle when someone is in anger or in kind of the opposite that I observe of like, well, that definitely didn't feel safe for me. But to realize that both are really just communicating that there's something deeper that's trying to be expressed. That's like my laywoman's way of describing, I think, just the things that I've been able to learn and observe, but tying it back to what you said about the compassion piece. And at its core, remembering that like underneath, that's what we actually all want is to experience like love and connection.
Absolutely. And I love what you were saying as well, because it all comes back to childhood. It creates all these patterns. And I'm on a similar path as what you shared. Like some of our patterns are actually praised.
Let's talk about this. This is, I mean, again, buyer beware, because this I think is going to shed some light on a lot of us listening that are very high achieving, very accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people pleasing is a huge one for me as well. I'd say my biggest one personally is validation.
Yeah.
It goes back to being a kid and stuff with my dad, we've worked through a lot, but when I was a kid, I definitely did have a lot of disconnect with him. And, without going into too much detail with that, it definitely created patterns within myself of seeking validation, seeking approval, wanting to be chosen, and just making sure that if I recognizing, if I achieve is when I get the validation.
Yeah.
And that definitely started young, and it helped me build my business. And that's the truth.
Right.
And now I'm unraveling. This is I'd say 9 years of having a business. Now that it's been 9 years, I'm unraveling. How do I take out those patterns, but keep growing myself and my business?
Yeah. Like keep the parts of the pattern that actually do work and that aren't, it's not all bad.
Yes.
Okay. So where have you come in your own exploration of that? Because this, I think, is such a powerful question, whether you're on a healing journey and you're listening to this, or there's just going to be something that kind of pings you to start down this journey. Because I think, especially if maybe you find yourself in the, I don't have, big T trauma, I don't know, maybe I don't even need to unwind these patterns. I can speak even personally, it's confronting to unwind the thing that you're like, but that's actually the same. It's the other side of the same characteristic that makes me successful. Will I lose my connection to what makes me successful?
Oh, that's such a big one. Yeah.
We have time.
That's such a big one. It wasn't until I was a few years into teaching yoga that I had realized I had become so attached, and almost I recognized, I was like, oh, that's kind of addictive, this pattern of how do I put it? The validation I would receive after teaching every class.
Yeah.
And I got that. I taught a lot back then as a new teacher, weekly, daily. I would get it daily.
And you really are so brilliant. Like, I never liked yoga, just being totally honest, until I took Taylor's class. That's honest right there.
I love you. So I'd probably say 7 years ago is when I started to see it. And it felt great. Of course, it felt great. It also felt like, I think it was the first time in my life I felt like I was shining at something and like thriving.
Yeah.
I actually really struggled in school. I almost dropped out. It was awful. School was so hard for me. I never excelled in it.
Yeah.
So I'd say I excelled in sports at a young age. But once I started teaching and finding my rhythm and my voice and received that validation, I became attached to it. I wanted it at first, 100%. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. We're not actually trying to say that there's anything bad about allowing that validation to feel good, receiving it, allowing yourself to receive it.
Absolutely. And now receiving it in a different way, right? Yeah. Not attaching my worth to it. And I had realized then that that was happening. I needed it. That's the thing, is I felt like I needed it to validate if I was doing well or not, versus finding that from within, validating myself from within, that I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm on my path. And versus externally receiving it, right? So today it still shows up in a lot of ways. It has helped me build an entire business. And of course, that's not the intention of why I build everything, but the pattern continues to present itself. And it almost keeps showing up at every next step I hit. In a different way. And I'm like, oh, wait, it's here now.
I always say it's like all my patterns just come back, but it's almost as though they like just go put on a disguise and they show up at the front door like, it's me. And you're like, no, this is the same. Wait, this feels like in Bridesmaids, where she just like puts on the big glasses and she's like, I'm Mrs. Iglesias. That's like what it's like. It's just the same patterns show up again and again. Yes. And that is, I think it's so important you're speaking to this, because you've grown this movement. You've now built this career and this brand that are successful. There's a lot of validation that you can find there. So in those moments when you catch yourself in the pattern, what's either the thing you say to yourself, or how do you start to, I almost imagine it kind of like that pattern like has its claws in me, and then like, how do I start to like peel the claws back and like, okay, I see what you're doing here. Thank you so much, return to sender.
Yeah, I think I notice it the most now from the highs and the lows.
Yes.
So when I see a high and a low hit is when it's my signal to check in.
And what would that maybe look like, a high and a low, just to give people like a really tangible example?
And I'd say, especially with like launches, launching a new offering, launching the next teacher training, launching a retreat, launching an event, selling out the event, the high of it selling out, the high of it being amazing, and then, or a launch not going great and having such a low, thinking like, I'm not good enough. Yeah. And it goes both directions. And I'd say having so many moments and so many launches hitting the high, then you start to seek it. So I was recognizing the pattern of addiction almost presenting itself in ways within my business.
Yeah.
I have to check in with that all the time. I also love what I do.
Yes.
I love what I do. I'm a manifesting generator. Yeah. I am so excited. I'm so passionate. And so I don't ever want to lose that. And so I come back to like, well, what's the intention behind it? Is this coming from a space because this is an offering that I'm so soul aligned with? Yeah. Like I know I'm meant to do it. Is it coming from a space of I'm feeling low self-worth.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need to put something out there to be validated.
Yes.
That I'm worthy.
Yeah.
And if I can see that, then I pause.
Yes.
And so I'm pausing a lot more lately in the sense of even like posting on social media. That's another way.
Such a tangible example. Totally.
Oh, where is this coming from? Do I want to post because I feel like I need validation? Or is this a true aligned message?
Yeah.
And so if I sense any little bit of it coming from over here, I don't do it.
Yeah.
And I take time to just sit.
Or like I'm reflecting on in the after period of posting, am I finding myself wanting to go and check the engagement? How well is it being received? Even in those moments, like the post is already up. Maybe there was a little bit of that looking for validation or whatever it was but to disconnect, and like a lot of times physically for me, that means like I'll just log out of Instagram for a while and be like, you know what, that post is up and I had the best intention behind posting it. I think I hear this so much, like as we get into talking with the community about strategies and all the things that I love, but at the same time, it's like, for me, business is such a mirror for my internal world. So it's not even for me about like, yes, I love strategy around ideal posting times, what kind of things are more likely to go viral. But I find more often than not that it's like the thing that I have this feeling inside, like, oh yeah, this is going to hit.
Yeah.
Could be with a launch too.
Yeah.
And then those are almost always the thing that I get humbled by, to realize that it's not ever just one post or one launch or one tangible action step, just insert whatever it is. It's monitoring ourselves, like where we can easily fall into those addictive behaviors of looking for the validation that we're meant to do what we're doing anywhere outside of us, anywhere outside of the experience we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can replace the word addiction with distraction too, right?
That's so good.
And it's like, or you're just chasing some type of energy rush.
Yeah.
A surge of energy.
Yeah.
We want to feel good. We all just want to feel good. That's really it. Underneath it all, everyone just wants to feel good. And so we're like trying to find things that make us feel good, even if it's quick.
Yeah.
And I think the dopamine highs in entrepreneurship are so massive, especially when there's like the more like event to event kind of thing, a launch in those ways, that it's easy to get lost in the patterns there.
Yeah. It's something I've been exploring a lot within my own healing process since you mentioned that. Is I've actually, again, on the surface, it's a very celebrated 100%. Brand. And when I look under the hood,
love that,
I've created a business model that is very much designed to meet the exact dopamine rush that I'm conditioned to look for, which is something that's not consistent. And I've really been looking at that and looking at where I can learn to, and this is something we talk about a lot within like the Expanders Retreat, and I think this conversation of like, well, how do you grow beyond it is, and I want to hear your answer to that. It's my version of it has been this beautiful process of understanding the role of my nervous system and where I'm sourcing that safety from. And can I allow consistency and not the high launches, which are very exciting, multiple six-figure launches all day long. I want that for all of us, but not when it's something that we're using as a replacement for that more boring, consistent sense of wholeness that doesn't need a launch to be a certain size. And so I've been very much looking at how that plays into the way that I've been conditioned to show up as an entrepreneur. And again, I don't think we're really talking about this enough, because a lot of us, I'll just say this personally, I don't like when people just kind of like put it out there. I realize how much even the way I was running my business was designed so that it could numb certain feelings that I wanted to avoid. And unwinding that has not been an overnight process, but I'm finding so much more safety and like a feeling of actual safety in the in-between. Therefore, it kind of takes the high highs off of the big launches, but it also takes the low lows. Like I'm not as affected by a launch that maybe doesn't perform in the way I had like perfectly made my strategy out to be. What has been your experience with that?
I love that. I think that what I had learned, and also the high highs and the low lows, where it was coming from for me was fear of losing it all.
Ooh, that's big.
And it still comes up 100%. I definitely had to work through fear of everything going away. And realizing that I think that was like kind of fueling the highs and the lows, because
Sure.
if it worked, then okay, we're okay. I can keep going. It's working. If it doesn't work, then oh my gosh, then what does this mean about myself? And how much have I attached my identity to what I do? And so those are the pieces I'm like pulling apart right now.
Yeah.
It's like, as you know, I'm on a health journey as well right now. And this ties into that, discovering that I have Lyme disease. A year and a half ago, I was extremely sick, bedridden, couldn't do anything for at least 6 weeks, but months before that and months after, still just awful. The 6 weeks, I was in a really dark place because I couldn't do anything. I had to cancel a whole yoga teacher training, a huge program. I had to cancel a yoga retreat to Costa Rica. I had to stop. The universe forced me to stop. I did not want to. I was so afraid to. It was the scariest thing. I had to literally confront my fears of canceling my big programs. To me, that was like, I lost it. So I had felt like I just lost it all. And I didn't want to stop. And so it was in that moment, like I knew these patterns of myself before, but then I had to like actually literally go through it to now be like, okay, you were okay. Like when I had thought I lost it all, I went into a depression and then I worked through it. And I realized how attached I was. I realized how afraid I was to lose it. I realized I'm okay without it. Like it's not, it doesn't define me.
Yeah.
So I had to go through a lot in that way to get to this point of, if it's not flowing, if something doesn't work out or it has to get canceled or whatever happens, it actually means nothing about who you are. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'm learning it. And I feel this sense of peace underneath it. And I think that then, like, kind of speaking back to what you were saying, it's like, it's the energy behind it all. And so now there's an energy behind everything I do of like, it's okay. However it works out is okay, actually. And not feeling this like force behind it. Yeah.
There was a question that came through. We have a text community, and I always ask for feedback. What do people want to hear on the podcast? And this question just came through. If I'm remembering her name correctly, I have like a photographic memory. Alora is her name, and she had asked, like, how do we actually uncouple like our identity from the success of our business? And what I'm hearing you say is that it is kind of like this constant, it almost mirrors your entire sobriety journey, right? It's like this constant awareness of when we make it about what it's just not about. It really isn't about us personally, but that is what the ego will do. It will attach itself to the success, to the money, to the external thing. And I don't think we necessarily have to go through losing it. But what you just described, I think, is the way to keep that in check, which is if you can, in your mind, go to the place of losing it, the thing you're most afraid of, and can you work with yourself, and I'm going to have you share some of your favorite tools for doing this, work with yourself to actually be okay in the not having it. That is a dangerous in a good way, place to be. Because you're no longer controlled by it. And we can do that. We can imagine, like, what if the worst case scenario happened? We don't have to go through it, but it's that nervous system regulation of actually getting to a point where you would be okay if it all went away. And then what would you do next? For me, that has been where the freedom lies. But for you, what are some of the tools or practices, or how do you keep yourself in that place of not being too attached, having your identity too attached to the external success?
Such a big question, because I continue to dance with it. I continue to dance with, well, I also know this is my soul is here on purpose to do this work. So it's really interesting to feel like not everyone has that experience, and there's no hierarchy or like better, less than.
Yeah.
Not everyone's like business is also their soul's purpose
or their job.
100%.
Exactly.
And so mine are like very, very connected. And I think that has definitely created that identity enmeshment into it as well. Like, okay, if this is my purpose, and also it has become my business, how do I untangle those as well so I don't identify with it, but continue to live in my purpose? I still dance with it every day. It's everything I teach people. I teach what I need. I teach what helps me. And it's different somatic based practices and going into my body and feeling and like slowing down.
Yeah.
When we pause, when we slow down, it gives us that space to really see the truth. Where is this coming from? What is my intention? What is my truth here? What do I need here to pause? And then I can recognize patterns and begin to untangle them, or make a different decision next time, or take a different action next time.
Yeah.
So it's really is through all of the embodiment practices and somatic-based practices that keep me grounded personally.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I teach others.
Yeah. And it all comes back to that pause. That's like the connection to what we were even talking about earlier that you spoke about. And you know, you also mentioned how you're noticing as you approach, it's like the next threshold, the next growth edge. That's a lot of times when the old pattern will come back dressed in a top hat, pretending it's not the same pattern, and it is. And it's been so fun to get to come back into each other's lives, like just in the last 6 months with, you know, you came to the last expanders retreat, the last 2 expanders retreat, and I've gotten to like see this catapult effect in your life and in your business over, again, such a short period of time, and like watching you put this into practice in a very real way. What was it? Where were you at in your business? So we talked last summer-ish.
Yeah.
Got to reconnect on just the years that we had like just been building our businesses and not getting to see each other day to day like we have in other seasons. And I remember you were at this catalyst point where you're like, I just know it's time to go bigger. What was going on in your life at that time? And like, what had you say like, okay, it's time to kind of like reinvest in myself and my growth? And then I just want you to share kind of like a little glimpse of what transpired in your life and in your business in the 6 months that followed, because it's so expansive. Yes, we can talk about it all day long, but when you see someone who has accomplished so much, but then it's like you keep saying like, no, I'm the one. Like, no, I'm like, watch what I'm going to do next. And it's inspired me. So I want others to hear it too.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So when we had talked before I joined the Austin Expanders Retreat, which was October last year, 2024, right? So a few months before that point, I was starting to play with it, and it was following after being really sick and recognizing how I've been running my business will not carry me forward, really. I wasn't doing it in a sustainable way. And I wasn't doing it. It was like I knew I just had to face it. I had to face what I knew I was avoiding about myself and about my business. And it all comes back to the patterns. It all comes back to this whole conversation. And how much business is spiritual. It's such a personal growth journey. So at the time I was like, okay, I see where this is going. I see it clearly. And I knew I needed to do something different and put myself in different situations and experiences to shed old ways and to learn new ways, and to also be expanded literally by other people doing something similar or years ahead or in different ways, or in ways that were more aligned and more sustainable. So at the point I was like, okay, I know what I'm building in my business. I know it's my next level. I know it's super scary. So I need support. I need community, and I need to invest in myself in a way that also scares me. And because my next offering scares me, and the price point is the highest price point, and it will scare other people. And so I kept going into that, like, and I think it was honestly you years ago that put it into my head, like, you have to go first. And you never said it to me specifically, but you would talk about it just in general.
And that's been my experience too.
Yeah, like, let me go first. Let me invest a scary amount into myself because I know I want to offer that at some point.
Yeah.
And I knew it was just all these little pieces coming together. And when I had saw you share about the Expanders Retreat, I was that intuitive tap. And at this point, I can feel that intuition, my intuition. And I knew I needed to be there. I just knew it was like the shift I needed. I knew it was with you. It was with the other women, the speakers. And it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. I think on the phone call with you, I was like, I'm like so in, but I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm scared to pay this. And you were like, perfect.
I was like, great.
That's exactly what I want. And I was like, I know, this is good. But it was just like, I needed that. I really did. And so going there, and you invited me to teach,
which was so magical. It was so powerful.
It was amazing. And that was a manifestation for me.
Yeah.
So it's like, when I had made the decision, just go all in, like, show yourself that you can go to this next level in yourself, in your business, in your life. And the universe always rewards it. It's always going to bring back and mirror back those decisions.
Yeah.
And with you, it was like immediate, right? Like, I had said, I'm in, I paid, and then you invited me to teach. And that was huge for me. I got to teach to these incredible women at the retreat as well. And I learned so much. And it was right after that, I want to say, is when I was already planning to launch my Costa Rica yoga retreat, which is now coming in July this year. And launches used to be so stressful for me before going on that October retreat. And the thing is they've always worked, except that one I had to cancel because I was sick. They always have actually worked. Like, they always end up filling, but I always have the same challenges, like mental challenges. Yes. And this one I had learned from you and from some of the other speakers how to launch in a way that's like grounded and sustainable and just having more of a process. And that Costa Rica launch was like the smoothest, most incredible experience ever. It literally sold 14 spots in 3 weeks. And I was like, that was easy. Like, it felt easy.
Yeah.
And it used to feel hard. And that was a huge step of like, wait, it can feel easy. Let yourself feel that, like, receive that, like, integrate that. And that was huge. And then after this past one in February, I went on again here, local in Scottsdale. I also, same thing, launched right after the huge program, 300-hour yoga and embodiment teacher training. And what I had learned on that retreat gave me the fuel, the trust, the guidance to enter that launch and to just run with it.
Yeah.
And I had great success with it as well, and it was just like, I really needed that support, especially with those. But just being in the room with everyone and seeing how we're all in it together. Yeah. At different points in our business, different amounts of revenue that come in, different types of businesses. Like, it's the same experience.
Yeah.
And I definitely used to feel like I'm not good enough to be in that room. And I was afraid before the first time I went, the first Austin one, and it showed me like, no, you belong here too. Like, you are worthy of this. I'm worthy of this. And that continues to be a practice, right? But being in the space with all of you and having that support and being able to have the conversations with others who have the same challenges and to be able to have the same conversation, because I actually feel like really lonely a lot building my business.
Yeah.
And I needed to be able to be in a spot where I can talk to other people that get it.
Yeah. Because we are, like, when I reflect on just like what a beautiful micro community within the greater Powerhouse Women community that Expanders has become. And yes, it's, you know, it's 4 businesses that are doing multiple 6 figures into 7 figures. Like, we're all kind of at a similar stage in business, but it's because you need accountability to make some of the decisions that aren't going to they don't even make sense to you sometimes. But like, I'm thinking for you of the transition, you know, you're ready to make within your business of scaling back on one-on-one clients, and something that when you look on paper, you're like, this doesn't make sense because this is where the bulk of my revenue is coming from. But I need to make this decision, and to be held by others who are like, you can do it.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching all of us, and myself included, because these are my peers. Like, it's become this place that there's so much momentum because it's normalizing the things that other people can see, that it's like, oh, it's a no-brainer. Of course you're going to be successful. But until you catch up with that vision for yourself, and it's just been so special to get to share that with you, and to have you contribute to this group as well. And leading embodiment and yoga and just helping us to really go so much deeper. It's just such an honor, really.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So you have so many exciting things coming up. You mentioned the retreat. You have yoga teacher certification programs. Where's the best place, like on the internet, for people to really find out how to participate, how to be a part of? You do a lot of cool stuff locally here in Phoenix. Is there one central place that people can find you?
Yeah, on Instagram, Taylor_Wray Yoga, and also awakening.soul. Yeah. And then my website's taylorrayyoga.com.
It's Wray, W-R-A-Y.
Yes, thank you for that.
We'll link it in the show notes, of course, but just in case someone skips over the show notes, we'll make sure to link it all, because, you know, you really, in this, I'm so grateful we got the chance to sit down and really capture your story in this way, because what I started out by saying, you embody the healing journey in a way that most can't, because they haven't had to face the depths of themselves in the way that you have. And it's just such an honor to be a witness to it, to be someone who gets to receive from it. And I'm curious, what do you think 13-year-old Taylor would say if she could see this version of you today?
Oh my gosh. 13-year-old Taylor would be so proud. It's like beyond proud. It's like you did it. You're doing it. You're living a life that feels good. You're living a life that makes you happy. You're living a life that you're in your purpose. And when I was 13, I didn't want to be alive. I was in such a dark place. I was so depressed that I was afraid of life. And so she's fucking proud. She's so happy for Taylor today.
What would you like to pause right now as adult Taylor?
Yeah.
And celebrate yourself for? We just call it a powerhouse moment. It's anything big or small, but just something recently or in the past few months, even if I think back again, like we're talking about 6 months ago being in Austin together. What is something you want to pause right now and acknowledge yourself for? If I ask, like, what's your most recent powerhouse moment that you want to celebrate?
It is, I had been visioning my 300-hour yoga and embodiment teacher training for years now. And I was too afraid to even go there. It was just so big. And, you know, I write the entire curriculum. It's an 8-month program. It's massive. And I had so much fear that was stopping me of, will anyone join? Will this work? And like, now I know it all is perfect timing, but I mean, that tap was there for years. So when something's tapping you that long, you know, and then you actually do it, it's so incredible. And so I'm in the process of writing the curriculum. I launched it. The registration's open. We start in September. It's halfway full. I'm really proud of myself because it was so scary to step into that. And that's my recent celebration.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. And I think we need to say that more often as friends to our friends. I'm just proud of you. I'm proud to know you. And thank you so much for bringing, I mean, that was so deep. And this is a conversation that I really am looking forward to having more and more, because I think if we can all come to terms with the fact that, you know, the things that we're most afraid to look at within ourselves are often the source of our greatest healing, this journey can actually become a lot more fun.
Absolutely.
And remembering that we don't have to do it alone.
Absolutely. And I'm so proud of you too, to watch everything that you've created over 9 years is like such an inspiration. I just love you so much.
Only took 9 years to become an overnight success.
No, literally. And then 10 years before that.
I love you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I love you so much.